Stormwater Management Advisory Committee for May. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, are there any comments or edits to the meeting minutes from our April meeting? No. No. Okay. No, if there are none, motion to approve? And all in favor?
Aye.
5-0, approve the meeting minutes. Now we'll have public comment.
Good evening. How are you? Hi. I'm Maya Van Rossum. I'm here in my capacity as the Delaware Riverkeeper for the Delaware Riverkeeper Network. And I had a question. I was at the Board of Commissioners meeting on Monday night, and at one point during the commissioners' discussion, it was my understanding that one of the commissioners said that at the next commissioners meeting, they were going to have a presentation of priority stormwater projects from the township staff to the commissioners. And if I viewed it correctly, upon saying that, there seemed to be affirmation from the staff that that was accurate. And so I was wondering if that was in fact correct, if you had any awareness of that intention.
I watched portions of the Board of Commissioners meeting, the ones that I thought were pertinent to stormwater, and I didn't note anything like that, nor have I heard anything of that nature from staff.
So I, as I recall, I don't think that the remark was made during the portions of the meeting that were specifically addressing stormwater. So I'm not sure if you were watching at that time or not. Can I ask that somebody please reach out to Steve Norsini tomorrow, or certainly you, Paige, reach out to Steve Norsini tomorrow and ask him whether or not this is the intention. And if it is, you know, if I find a way to communicate it to the public, and if I could make the request, if that could be communicated to me, I'd appreciate it. I'd be happy to reach out to Steve directly, but it seems more appropriate for the committee to do it. But I would appreciate a heads up, because I would have concerns if there are recommendations from the staff for priority stormwater projects going to the Board of Commissioners that were not part of your process, because your process is the opportunity, as I understand it, where the public really gets to get engaged and give input and before it goes to the commissioners. So it would be concerning for me, and I'd want to make that communication early and often. So thank you.
Thank you. I'll check in with Steve tomorrow. And yeah, next we're going to move on to discuss the MS4 proposals and potentially make a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners for a selection of firm to prepare the MS4. There were 5 firms, I believe, that submitted proposals in request to the response to the RFP. There was Cedarville, Hanover, McCormick Taylor, Meliora, and Land Studies. And I read those through. I discussed this with Heather Gill, who's one of those folks who's probably the most familiar on our committee with the MS4 process. And I wondered if anyone had any comments, had read through those, had any comments before I get into what Heather and I had discussed.
I read all of them, and the way that I interpret it, and I'm certainly a novice when it comes to MS4, there are several that stand out to me as being the way to go. I'm very interested in hearing what you have to say.
Any other comment? So when Heather and I spoke about them, there were several that stood out for her as well. And I believe there was, she had on there land studies, Meliora, and Hanover. We talked a little bit further about the costs and the experience and the scope. We had felt that Meliora had the most complete scope. The fee seemed fair. They have the experience. We understand, and they're a local firm that's familiar with this area. The other proposals, were by and large good. We had a little concern about, there were some gray areas in some scope, particularly in Hanover's, that we felt was a little gray. And land studies, we had a concern about. They're partnering with McMahon, who's, and that's all well and good. Meliora is partnering with other folks too. There was something, I believe it was called Tracer System, that they were using for their database type of information. And there were add-ons for purchasing seats or something of that nature.
Add-ons to the contract? Add-ons
to the contract that were not in the base price. And we were concerned about how that might, could go well above the base price of the contract. Any further comment?
Just a question about what this contract specifies relative to like what CH2M was specifying, just in terms of the scope that they had looked at.
And I wish Heather was here to discuss this because she's much more familiar with the MS4 process. But my understanding is, the first go-round that CH2M was writing a proposal to a larger scope, and then they were given a reduced scope, I believe more in line with what the folks who responded to the RFP came back, that's what they were responding to as well. And my understanding is that this was on Penn Bid or, some public forum, anyone could submit a proposal. So if CH2M wanted to amend their proposal, they certainly could have.
And in terms of, this is a one-year contract? 5-year, okay.
The bulk of the work is going to happen within the next year.
Mm-hmm.
There's different pieces.
Yeah, there are different phases.
There are different pieces, and the first piece has a very tight deadline into September, mid-September. I've forgotten exactly the date. It's going to be very difficult for any firm that is not really familiar with this area, in my opinion. It appears it's going to be very difficult, period, to make that date. And there's substantial impacts if we don't make the date. We're already behind the 8 ball.
And then in terms of cost, what was this a cost per year, or, what was the number, just so that public has a notion of what that's like?
I believe that these were all total costs for the entire period of service. Where the bulk of it is going to occur, though, in the next year and a half, though, the services.
Just a ballpark number?
Well, Meliora was, I believe, 124, 195. Are there any other comments on that?
All right, so you're making a recommendation?
I'd like to make a recommendation that Sumac recommends that Board of Commissioners engage Meliora Design to complete the MS4 for Radnor Township. We can put something else in the memo if we want to just briefly state, we looked at, fees, experience, scope, local presence, and we felt that they were the best suited.
I would second that. I agree. That was my prime recommendation of the 5 that we saw, the 5 that responded. So I would go along with that for sure.
Aye.
Making a
Aye, aye.
motion there.
Is there any other comment, maybe?
I completely trust you guys and your judgment.
Okay, and so motion to recommend Meliora Design to the Board of Commissioners for the MS4? All in favor? Aye. 4-0. It passes, and I will write up that memo. It's just going to be a couple sentences, and I'll get that in by tomorrow, because I understand that it needs to be there for the commissioners, because they have to vote on this at their next meeting.
Yeah, they have to. This group has to get started. From everything that I've read in all of the proposals, this is something they've got to get started on.
Could I make a recommendation? Since we no longer have a stormwater administrator and we don't have anybody from Radnor here, I recommend that we just make it practice that we provide a summary with key recommendations that we send to Steve and copy Bob and the Board of Commissioners after every meeting.
Do we want to bring Regina back in for?
We could, yeah, and whenever you want it. I mean, this could be wait till the end of the night. I just think that, we need to clearly and very articulately capture what we are and aren't recommending and what we are and aren't saying, because I'm just not comfortable that the message is being heard, to be quite honest with you.
Okay, that sounds good. Let's just get Regina in here so that she hears it, and she can be a part of that discussion. Somebody's get Regina?
I just texted.
Okay. So Joe was just bringing up something. Yep. Why don't you go ahead so that Regina can be.
So while you were gone, we agreed to, on a 4-0 vote on who was going to get the MS4, and Paige said, well, I'll write Steve a memo about that. And I made a broader comment that I feel with no administrator, stormwater administrator, nobody from Radnor that comes to our meetings, nobody from Radnor administration, that we should just make it a practice that after every one of our meetings, we just, come up with a very simple email that or letter that highlights the key points that were done and what recommendations we bring forward on a whole. And we send it to Steve and Bob and copy our commissioners, or at least I would forward it to my commissioner, because I'm just not comfortable that the message is getting out, quite frankly.
Sure, I'm just curious how other committees work and whether any other committees have that kind of structure where there's really no township involvement.
I think we're unique in that we're basically have no township involvement, so it's like, we'll take it. I mean, I assume if I go down the Parks and Recs, I'll see Tammy Cohen down there. Am I right or wrong?
And Shade Tree has commissioners that are on.
My wife's on the Board of Health, and she has Larry there every meeting. You know, I mean, which is fine, like, if
Yeah,
that's
you
the
might
way,
know better than.
if that's the way they want
You
to
might be
proceed.
more familiar with the other committees and how they operate. I know the Planning Commission obviously has a lot of people there.
Yeah, I mean, every time I've been into a committee meeting, there's at least some representation there. I think there's always somebody from the staff there that provides support. I didn't know that the stormwater administrator position was gone.
We may bring back Dan or whomever on an hourly basis, but as a contracted for a year or two basis, we decided that was, it was, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but we
Well,
made a
no, I
recommendation.
think we made a recommendation to
Right.
continue CH2M in that role on an as-needed basis to attend meetings and advise our committee, not necessarily to embark on a new contract, but to extend the existing. But I guess that hasn't happened.
For a year, have we heard anything at all about this? Or till the end of the year?
Yeah, I think we can bring them back on an as-needed basis as we see fit, but there's not a contract, per se in place.
Did you get authorization from anyone to do so?
I don't know that we strictly have authorization. I mean, but there's certainly not a contract in place right now.
Right, so I don't think we can call them up and say, hey,
No,
please attend our meeting.
We cannot call them up. We, through the township, could request that.
I think we did request that, and we see an empty chair, so the request
Well,
was
no, we
denied,
had,
in my
I mean,
opinion.
Dan specifically did ask, am I coming to, like, the last meeting? And the answer was no. I mean, as I remember the marathon session we had in whatever month it was, March, that we decided to not get a new administrator. So
Right,
no new contract.
But we did ask to extend the existing contract such that we could have representation at our meetings and also take care of the GIS element of the updating of the stormwater billing system. And I guess no answer to me is a no. Since no one agreed and said, yes, we'll go ahead and do that and put that in place, then my assumption is that the answer to that request is you're denied.
I think we should ask for a clarification that from the commissioners.
You can ask for that, but in the meantime, I would assume the answer is no.
I concur with your assumption.
I'm not quite sure if that's exactly what it is, but it would have to be authorized by township.
No, I agree. It would, obviously it can't come from us. But however, at this time, I don't think that's in place. I'm not saying that couldn't change, but currently, we don't have that mechanism.
Quite simply, they were on a 2-year contract, and the contract expired, and there's no other contract in place. So just simply, there's nobody, right? So I'm not arguing or disagreeing. I'm just stating fact that there isn't anybody here. I wasn't expecting anybody here. So until things change, I just feel, getting back to my point, I feel it's incumbent upon us, if we want to continue to be a viable committee, which I got to be honest with you, I really question. But if we want to continue to try to be a viable committee, then we need to push to make sure that our communication is and our thoughts are heard. Because otherwise, it's not in everybody's best. It seems to me that it's not in a lot of people's best interest for us to our information to be heard. That's the impression I get.
Well, I guess I agree with what you're saying, but I also feel that at this point in time, if what Maya brought up is that there's going to be recommendations made from township staff to the Board of Commissioners regarding priority projects, and we haven't been informed of that, then obviously we're clearly out of the loop, and there's really no benefit to us even hearing from the public if that's not being passed up forward. So I would urge anyone who has any concerns about those prioritizations to go directly to the Board of Commissioners with their concerns and the township staff, because clearly that's not going to be a role we're going to play in any of that. Oh, I agree that a regular communication is a great idea.
Yes, that sounds like a good idea.
But that brings the other question is that I guess you took care of the minutes last time, Paige. That's kind of a lot of work. I don't know if that's something you're going to want to be doing for every meeting, or if that's something that should rotate, or how we want to handle that. Do you have any input?
I'm okay with doing that. If someone else would like to do it, that I would love to give them an opportunity. But
Are you okay with doing tonight's at least?
yes,
Okay,
yes,
thank
I
you.
will do tonight.
And I can volunteer to do the inaugural memo to Radnor, but that would be something that we would, I'd write up and we would agree to. It would only be what we talk about publicly. But the goal would be we would try to get that within one business day and we could decide on, but I think we would just do.
So are you going to just do that and then send it to us for input?
Yeah,
Or
and
did
then-
you want to just?
Oh, absolutely. And
Okay.
then, you could use that in your minutes, but it would be at a much higher level with just the key recommendations and things that we wanted to bring forward.
I just want to make an
Comment?
efficiency suggestion, thought on that. I think it's a great idea, and I was just wondering, for the most efficiency, if maybe it would be simplest just at the meeting, every time there's a discussion and a decision made, that the bullet point get written up and put on the screen, and everybody says, yeah, that's it. Like, you could read off the recommendation for Meliora, and it's because it's just going to be a bullet point list, and then literally the email would be done at the meeting, the public would see it, you would agree to it, and it could go right off to the commissioners immediately after the meeting. Just a thought. It's how I do it for some of my stuff.
Thanks, that's a good idea.
You take your notes, I'll take my notes, and then at the end, we'll just compare, but I'm just going to, just bullet points that would be the substance of without the details. And maybe that could be the minutes, who knows? We'll see. Maybe I'll take care of it for you. I need to know how to spell Miliori, but we'll do that
Well,
later.
the minutes that we've had have been fairly detailed, and I don't think that level of detail is necessarily required. And if they were shorter, a one-page minute summary could be what you send. I don't know that there has to be two separate things. If the minutes are forwarded, that could be adequate.
Okay. Ready to move on to township-wide assessment discussion?
Yes, so.
Yeah, do you have it loaded up there?
Okay. So if we could have this on the overhead. There we go. Where is, oh, there it is. Okay. So we formed a subcommittee, that was Joe, Paige, and I, to try to rough out some ideas of what the capital improvement projects would be for 2018, recognizing the very compact schedule that we have for deciding this, as in get something to them by July. We want to have a consensus, I spelled meetings wrong, a consensus on the list of CIP, capital improvement projects by May, and then present to the Board of Commissioners in June. That's the basic goal. And so we took the CH2M selection criteria that had originally been presented, modified it with the public input that Dan had given in his final report. And then we have some recommendations for projects, and specifically there's top 4 CIPs to the Board of Commissioners with our reasoning as the goal here. So the criteria, flood reduction was the biggie that we were looking for. One of the things that was raised was whether there's negative downstream impact, and so that's something that we wanted to include in the assessment. Runoff volume reduction, So I had a question there about whether, how can we assess that unless we know something about the characteristics of the project? So I'm not sure it's something we can, I guess I have a question for you all, is whether or not that's something that can be done initially, or is that something that has to happen as you go through the engineering?
To know specifically, you'd have to do testing. You may have an idea of the soils in the area. I mean, you may know if it's an absolute no-go by some information you have on the soils, but it will be difficult to know infiltration rates, specifically what they were without doing testing.
I think with the budgets that we're looking at, the scale of the projects that we're looking at, I don't think the soil is a stopping point. I think groundwater levels are a stopping point. I don't think we can do anything in cases where the groundwater level is too high to achieve any infiltration. I don't think we're going to go to the cost that it would take to, provide barriers and things like that. I think instead, though, we could entertain, if there's plenty of depth to groundwater, improving soils on an as-needed localized basis. So I don't think that's a deal breaker.
Okay.
But the groundwater depth is, and I think that's a little bit easier to establish and a little less costly. So that might be something that, I don't know if it's something we can do. Obviously, if we have to make a recommendation now, it's not really, we don't have a funding mechanism for that.
It would be difficult to do now, though we could encourage, for instance, like on Banbury Francis, it's an open-bottomed system which promotes infiltration. Even if you didn't know specifically what the rates were, you could encourage using practices like that would promote infiltration. How much you actually get is not known at the time that you recommend the project, though.
Right.
So you can't rely on it necessarily. So what you're saying, Paige, is that we would look at designs that would have the potential for volume reduction if the
Conditions are
criteria is favorable.
Okay, yeah, that's helpful. So we listed this as highest priority. Obviously, this is directly linked to safety and ability to get around in floods. So that was a high priority. Ownership is another one that that was mentioned. Obviously, it's the quickest solution if Radnor owns stuff, and you can see that there are projects that would be difficult to do because of the ownership. Water quality, so I saw that, and you can correct me, as directly linked to the MS4 pollution reduction plans that would be put together. So that would be our most concrete way of assessing whether a particular project would fit into that. I guess, again, the question I have, and you can help me with, is specifically how does that show up when we have a project? Do we target it to a particular location? I guess it's just education here that I need, maybe the public needs as well.
Personally, I don't think we should be doing any projects that don't contribute in some way to pollutant reduction. I think that's something that can be incorporated to nearly any project.
Okay.
But there are going to be degrees to which they have an impact based on location, based on the catchment area, based on the type of project we're proposing. So are you saying we'll have higher value pollutant reduction, medium value, low value, or it's a yes, no?
Well, I guess based on what you just said, that there's going to be not a yes, no, but a range. And so something
So
that
for the
gave you
weighting criteria, you'd have a
right.
high, medium, low kind of a thing?
Yeah.
Paige, how do you feel about, how can we know that at the time? We haven't done any preliminary studies.
It may be difficult to know in some cases. In some cases, if you're doing something that's, more conveyance-based, there's going to be little or nothing there. But it could be an important project to do for other reasons. I think we try to incorporate it where we can, but again, like the volume reduction, I don't think we can depend on some certain level of pollutant reduction at this stage of the game.
I agree. I think just an idea is that we could simplify this whole thing by just saying we will not entertain anything outside Radnor's ownership. We will incorporate to the maximum feasibility within our budget the water quality elements, no matter what the project is, and the same with volume reduction. And then we're back down to one criteria, which is flood reduction and safety.
Yeah, we'll keep going here. Yeah, I mean, so what I'm hearing is this can't necessarily be a criteria. It's just going to be part of the specification for any project going forward.
Right, because if you have a project proposed, I can make it a low, medium, or high pollutant reduction project based on how much I spend on it.
Okay. Okay, so another thing was listed, cost sharing and partnership opportunities, and that showed up in some earlier projects we've had. Operations and maintenance needs. Is it a public amenity or community asset? So, something like that might be the Green Street, the West Avenue Green Street, and whether or not that kind of improves the area just in terms of look. Constructability, and one of us here said needs further definition. Was that you? I can't remember, somebody. There was some list somewhere where somebody asked, it was in the public comment for that. It was just needed more definition of what constructability means. And again, it feels like you have to actually start the project to figure that out, or is it?
Not necessarily. This is a case where, as you're designing a project, you take a look at it and see how difficult is it to actually build? How expensive is it going to be? Can we do it? Usually everything can be done at a cost. So if the constructability is high, then it can be, in my opinion, relatively easily constructed. If it's not, if it's very low, it's going to take a lot of resources to construct it. So
I guess I'm thinking of the example of where we're trying to make water go uphill to go to Valley Forge.
The Cowan, taking to Cowan Field, that's what I was thinking of. That would be a very deep cut. I mean, it would basically rip apart the entire street and right-of-way. It can be done, but you're going to cut off access to homes, and it's going to be difficult.
Yeah, okay.
And the other example was the whole North Wayne, South Wayne, Lancaster intersection and getting water across that. And we had looked what was underground, and there was all kind of pipes underground, and you couldn't figure out, it was deemed unconstructible by some.
Right, but it also ties in with benefits, because it could be very low constructible. In other words, it would take a lot to build it, but the benefit may be very great also.
And I think on the one example, it's tangible. The constructability issues are tangible. However, when you're talking about underground utilities and things like that, you can't necessarily know those before you've done some preliminary engineering. So I think the only one you can use in the ranking really is the concept element. You can't really say, the utilities are too heavy here. You really don't know, because they might be just as heavy somewhere else, and you just don't know it yet. So I think it really has to be more, if it's going to be a weighting criteria, I think it has to have more to do with the concept itself, which to me, it seems like we should eliminate concepts that are not constructible at this point in time. So again, I'm kind of back on the same thing where we're just looking at flood reduction at this point. And I think same can be said about public amenity. You should incorporate the community asset and public amenity to most feasible availability. And the operation and maintenance, you should reduce them by choosing projects that make sense for operation and maintenance. The cost sharing and partnership opportunities, that one still stands, I think. So that if I'm looking at this page right now, I have two criteria.
One of the things that, as I was writing this up, I wondered about is, so with Banbury Francis Way, the first one, we kind of assumed it was going to go all the way through. In other words, it was going to go to construction, and it was just like, let's just get it done. And here, I think we're saying, I mean, this is how I imagine it, that we're proposing, a set of projects, and that, and what Joe had suggested was that they move forward in tandem through at least the RFP stage, just to get a sense of what is potentially feasible, but that some of them could die, halfway through. Joe, you want to comment?
Okay, in putting that package together of projects that you're going to look at, then it would be the flood control and the potential for cost offset. And then what you would do then is you do enough investigation to get some cost data, some constructability data, the O&M data. Is that what you're saying? And then you would shake that out from there?
Yeah, no, it's not a one step.
That makes sense.
It's at least a two-step process.
That makes
where projects
sense.
die. They
Yes.
naturally die because.
And you don't heavily invest in them when they're really not realistic for our budget.
Right. Joe?
Okay.
Let me be clear I don't think that we should be doing any more modeling. And there are some exceptions to that, but in general, I think we've modeled enough. And so my opinion is the things that you'll see on this list are things that we should put forward and give recommendations on to take action to get detailed engineering design that would end up with construction-ready drawings.
I don't know that I would agree with that. I think I like Paul's approach better in that, and I wouldn't call it modeling. I would call it preliminary engineering. And I would look at 5 projects, because we can't afford more than one a year, really, realistically,
Right.
one large-scale project a year.
That's not
But
true.
the-
For these on this list, I think we should wait
Well, I
because
guess it's going to be different. If there's some that you want to advance, like we did with the Banbury Francis, that's a different story. However, in general, with that large group of, what was it, how many are on the list? I don't even.
32.
Yeah, so that 32 projects, I think what would happen is you'd take the high-impact ones and put them into a preliminary investigation with one person looking at all of them, so that they're all in the same equal playing field when they're evaluated.
if I could, I don't think we're doing each other justice in that we've jumped to the last page in the movie or the last 5 minutes of the movie and we're only at the introduction of the movie. Like, this presentation is good, but I think we shouldn't have this discussion until after we go
Okay.
through.
Okay.
Because I think when you see the 4 that are chosen and the cost for those 4 and what they're going to impact, we may change our minds about what we could do and couldn't do.
So,
That's all.
he's just saying go on. Let's go on.
The way it started out with the discussion is that we're revising the criteria. So if we're looking at revising our criteria for evaluating projects in general on a whole basis, that's what my comments are relative
Yeah,
to.
okay. Yeah, I'm good. Somebody had asked to consider erosion. I guess that applies to some of the projects that are, Maplewood and Highview are projects that are fixing erosion problems. So that was a question somebody asked. Then this gets into a little bit more specifics in terms of not just the project itself, but the impact on the community, which is something that the Board of Commissioners did point to very directly. So what's the nature and location of the flooding? So way back when we said, is it somebody's basement? Is it somebody's yard? Is it flooding their first floor? Is it the street blocking access for safety vehicles? Another question would be the number of residents and businesses benefiting from the project. So is it a shared or common area? And this was Elaine Schaefer's specific comment about, let's look at downtown if we can first. And then again, public safety vehicle movement. So again, that's not project-based, that's more like what's the community impact? So that's separate from flooding or flood reduction. So maybe there's those 2 things that we're weighing here. All right, so this is just a list of projects. Again, we put this up so that people can see it. We just got Banbury Francis Way approved. Congratulations, everyone. And then Maplewood. This is, Paige, you want to say what Steve had talked about in terms of Maplewood and Highview?
I really don't have much of an update there. Highview, I believe he just got some more plans in for that, but don't have a cost on that yet, which we are eagerly awaiting.
Great. So just to point out the dates here, so Maplewood was approved for RFP in February of 17, but Highview was approved in June of 15. So I'm not sure why it's taking that long, but it's just taking that long.
Maybe that was before, I think that was probably before we knew the entire scope of
Yeah, that
the
wasn't when it was
project.
That was the
tasked
original
for
one that
We
design.
thought
thought
would
it
be
was more
small.
limited in scope,
Right,
yes.
right. But that's when the question first came up at the board and they approved that smaller scope project, yeah.
But when, do you have, I think a more fair date would be when that was tasked to Gannett Fleming to design, because,
I only have a record of what the Board of Commissioner approved, so I'm not sure.
okay.
No one's ever come back to the Board of Commissioners and said,
Because, that was something where there was a plan that didn't come to fruition, and then we went back to the drawing board. So it's
Right.
almost like round two.
right, you'd have to go into the meeting minutes or guess ask Steve, but anyways. Then just an update on SEPTA. So I did ask Steve to tell me exactly what was going on with Amtrak. It is Amtrak that's holding us up, not SEPTA. And so we need to do soil testing, and as I understand from what Steve, and this is basically quoting him, Amtrak's insurance requirements for contractors doesn't distinguish between a 100-ton crane working on the tracks and then a truck taking soil samples in the parking lot. And so for the larger contract, it's not a big deal. For the smaller contract, it's quite a big deal. And so they're kind of stuck between and betwixt.
I'm not sure what we're looking to even do. Can you tell me what exactly, where we're testing soil and for what concept plan?
The original design was two smaller, go ahead, speak up.
Yeah, I don't recall exactly, but there was the grant money.
Right, from
that-
SEPTA.
From SEPTA that covered, there was a small design, some limited infiltration, an underground project from what I recall.
And it
some
was a
underground
smaller
storage.
system, it wasn't a lot of retention, and then when Dan and Steve talked about this, they said, could we make this a bigger project that has some significant impact? And we'll show you the map of the flooding impact for that. And so the original soil sample was for infiltration rates to help design the stormwater system.
Yeah, because the only time I remember Gannett Fleming coming and talking about it was something to do with paving a gravel driveway.
Well, it's a parking lot, and I guess they want to understand the soil characteristics underneath the parking lot, so.
Are we talking about the parking lot that's on the north side of the railroad
It's not,
tracks?
this is, so I have a picture, Dan sent me a picture of the design, and he showed exactly where it was. I'm not sure if it's in this presentation, but I could send it to
So is the
everybody.
design now with,
But it's, there's that big retaining wall that's opposite where Pennsylvania Avenue comes off of, whatever the other road is there, by the train station. And it's really high, and it's the same level as Jim Lament's car shop. That's the lot, I think, that they're talking about. It's that one, not the parking lot for commuters. It's the parking lot, and it's much bigger.
well, it's neither the north or south parking lot for commuters?
I don't
Neither
think so.
of
Now,
those.
Cynthia Curley had asked a similar question, which one is it? I honestly, I'd have to look at the specific drawing, which I have somewhere in here.
My question is, if it's that high up, what's really draining to it?
Yeah.
I don't recall the specifics. I mean, it was a long time ago, and then it's gotten held up in the insurance requirements for the soils testing for probably, 2 years
Almost a
now.
year, yeah. I mean, all right, so what I think we'll do
So I
going
guess we need
forward
to get more
is get
information and see
clarification on the
why this
specific
is not
project. Maybe we
moving.
just talk to Gannett Fleming and ask them what.
Well, I mean, once again, in this case, the recommendation is we really don't, I mean, again, you know me, I speak my mind. We really don't care what's been done. because our recommendation is whatever's been done doesn't matter. We recommend that somebody go forward and look at that whole Amtrak property to determine what's the best thing to do to reduce water, and then just go back to Amtrak with what that is, because, you know, we're scurrying around here. It's one plat of land. It has two sides to it. It's owned by Amtrak. We need to reduce water. Let's go figure out what can be done. And I think we should just take a clean paper approach, and that's what you'll see in a couple charts. That's what the sub-team kind of agreed to. Because I agree with you. It's been like, well, it's this gully that's not going to help us, and then it was something different. But the good part is Radnor really hasn't spent hardly any money on this, I don't think, at all. So, you know, it's not like we've wasted money. We've wasted time, but we haven't wasted money. So.
Okay. And then Wayne Field, the North Wayne Field repair upgrade. It's my understanding that there's action by the Board of Commissioners expected soon about the repair. So our recommendation will hopefully get put in place.
Can you talk a little bit about, I thought there was some strings attached to that recommendation?
My last communication with Jim Higgins, who's going to propose this, is that he wants the repair to go through by itself. And he's going to propose other things that would be helpful, like the SEPTA and the West Avenue and maybe the realignment and all that. But he wants this just to be a clean, do the repair.
Okay, the reason I ask is these continual delays. So we don't want to, like, the more complicated we make
Right, that's why he wants it to be
something,
a
the
clean,
less likely
just
that it will
repair.
move.
So, and in listening to the Board of Commissioners, meeting that portion of it, I mean, I think they really need to hear the numbers from Dan. So, you know, there's been all this qualitative, you know, increases, decreases in flood elevation, but we need to hear what the quantitative are
Well,
before we can,
just
you
to
know.
be
And
clear,
I think
he
we do
do
need
that-
that hard data is what Paige is saying. We need the hard data with actual numbers, not graphics, not.
But just so I'm clear, didn't Dan present to us and to the Board of Commissioners the different options and how they increase flooding for different, I mean, hasn't this been analyzed to death already?
We're not asking for analysis, we're asking for the data behind the representations in the graphics.
Right, we want to hear the hard numbers, and I heard something in the Board of Commissioners meeting that he had refined the analysis, and perhaps there were decreases now in some places where there had been increases before. But we have to see the numbers, and everyone discussing who's going to flood and who's not, it's really a pointless discussion until we actually know what
So,
it said.
I mean, you and I have asked Dan for those specific numbers. He's sending me stuff, but you're saying you haven't gotten what you need yet.
I haven't, but when I spoke with Steve today, it was either today or yesterday, apparently CH2M delivered some box of material, which I believe is all the output data. But, you know, that was just, I think, delivered to the township within the last 24 hours. So no one's had a chance to, you know, and apparently it's quite a bit of data. You know, no one's had a chance to go through it yet.
So I assume there aren't many people qualified to look at that data?
I mean,
Did I
Certainly,
misstate myself there?
It's hard to say, we don't know what's in there.
Well,
Yeah.
so Joe, one thing would be for us to get access to the data so that we can look at it, because I think we have people who can look at it and make sense of it, so.
and I think, Steve had to run, but, you know, I think we'll try to figure out a way how we get access to that data. It's apparently a whole box full of data, and, you know, how do we
Well,
make that available?
Right, we can ask Dan what specific part of the box we want to look at for North Wayne, so. Okay. Any other comments on North Wayne? All right, so that's the current projects. Let's move on now. So the idea the idea for 2018, because it was a compressed cycle in terms of there's not much time for us to get a prioritization, we wanted to take the CH2M results and this idea of community impact or shared or common areas, and then are there clear project priorities, low-hanging fruit? And our conclusion was yes, and so we want to present those. All right, so basically, and we'll look at the details for each of these, list in an order of what we think is the highest priority to lowest. One would be, the first one would be the South Wayne inlet pipes. The second one is the West Wayne Green Streets. The third one is what Joe was talking about before, the clean sheet, look at SEPTA lot from the kind of the ground up and design a system that would have the greatest impact. And then the fourth one was the Radnor Trail. At a guess, I guess it'd be 400K now, but we were just figuring that the cost for doing this preliminary design would be on the order of 100K per project, so that'd be 400K spent in this year. Is that fair?
Going for design or for
Well, I don't know.
construction?
Well,
Through the
I
numbers.
think, you know, when I had,
Construction's more than that,
again, we can talk about this at the end,
right?
but and this is Joe guesstimate, was that it would be about 100K to get construction-ready plans for those 4 projects, some being bigger than others, South Wayne being fairly simple, West Wayne being a little more complicated, you know, the SEPTA lot, who knows, you know, but in general, 100K, because that's roughly what we paid T&M for Banbury Francis Willows. But again, now that was assuming that you wanted to go forward with, you know, something more than what you may want to do.
Okay, so 2 quick questions. The Radnor Trail, can you,
We're going to go into details for each of
well,
these.
can you tell me, that's completely township property, right?
We'll go into detail.
Okay, well, because number 3 is not, so it's kind of breaking our rule number 1.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, okay. Okay, so South Wayne Inlet, it's a little hard to see. So estimated total cost, 220K. In terms of the flood reduction, your criteria there, it was number 3 overall in the list of the 32 projects. It had a relatively high cost-benefit ratio. We want to say it's the highest priority because it addresses flooding in a high-traffic, very shared area. And then, Paige, you could say more about this. We suggested that the RFP leave open how exactly this would be done. So,
I know Dan's recommendation was to add some more inlets to help the water get across the street and into the system on the middle school side of things. I think, Regina, you and I have talked before about, you know, perhaps there could also be multiple pipes or a shallow box section or some other means of conveying more water across the street to reduce that flooding the street. So I would like the RFP to leave open the option to, beyond the inlets, you know, to include other measures to get the water to the middle school basin area there.
So the basic concept is to convey the water to that system. We're not dictating how.
right.
Right, I mean, we would provide them with what information, conceptual information we have, but if they have other ideas that could get it there, that's fair game.
I just remembering a discussion about the whole basin and whether or not it would be included in that project. Like, wasn't there a weir needed on the outlet of the basin, of the retention system?
My understanding from Steve, and it's been a while since we discussed this, is that I think that's being taken care of independently of the rest of this. There was something left off of the outlet structure, was my understanding. It wasn't constructed properly, but that's a separate issue. I mean, that can, I'll check with Steve on the status of that was not dependent upon this.
The assumption, and I'm not sure it should be assumed, is that the system is okay now. And it's been So I just think maybe
Well, I guess
part of
Paige is
that
going to
would-
follow up and find out the status and get back to us
Right.
on
I
that.
mean, how do you tell if a system like that's working if water's not flowing through it? So,
Right, the water's not getting there right now, or a lot of the water is not getting there, and then that's what this is supposed to, intended to
yeah,
address.
but how do you know it's working?
It's not working because it was never connected.
the
There's
water's
No, but I
nothing to
mean,
work.
how do you know it's not clogged? How do you know it's not filled in? How do you, I mean,
There are inspection points
Okay.
that, you know,
okay. I just want to make sure when we finish the project that we don't find out that the system itself is not working.
I would imagine whoever would be designing this would take an inspection as a starting point.
Okay. All right, so that's number one. Number two is West Wayne in terms of the Green Streets. So this is about 510K. Ed had the fourth highest score for flood reduction. We named it the second highest priority. It is addressing that whole area, so basically North Wayne, the railroad underpass, and it addresses the flooding in the most south portion of North Wayne where Poplar and Pennsylvania Avenue flooding is going on. And then it would also have that public amenity part of it.
So the West Wayne point on the, oh, you can't point, you don't have a light. I thought you
I'm
had
sorry,
thinking you
this
had-
is West Avenue, it's not West Wayne. I should kind of rename that. Although I don't know how far up.
It's
gonna
West
go.
Avenue,
So
where,
it's West Avenue. So West Avenue is if you go to where.
is it on the map? I mean, can you,
Yeah, let's see. So if
Oh,
this
you
is
do have a
North
pointer.
Wayne
Okay.
right here.
yes.
So it's coming in on this side and then, so this whole thing, the question is how far back can we go to do something? This looks like AT&T right here. And the question is, could we go up even further on this? To
But the-
prevent the flooding that's going underneath the railroad tracks,
But the idea was basically the Great American Pub corner
right?
to at least up, give or take, AT&T property.
I guess my question about this one, which, it's great way to do something in that location, is what is our design storm? Because green streets will be helpful in smaller storms, but if we have this commitment as a township to the 25-year storm, I would wonder whether or not this is,
This was a 10-year, this.
Going to get us there.
This simulation is a 10-year storm.
okay, so we saw an
So what are you saying
impact
that, what is your understanding that we have a commitment to 25-year storms?
coming down from the Board of Commissioners. It seems that we do not like projects that do not eliminate the 25-year storm flooding. So if that's mandated from the top, then we have to kind of make our
Well, that's going to.
plans accordingly.
One thing I learned is that the way CHM2 defined, me, the novice, I hear 10-year and I hear 25-year and I assume it's 2.5 times bigger, right? It's not. 10-year storm is a little bit over 2 inches and a 25-year storm is like 2.5 inches. So basically, the difference between a 10-year storm and a 25-year storm, a 10-year storm is 85% of a 25-year storm. Does that make sense? So in other words, whatever, I could do the math, but I remember the number. It's 2.16 inches in a 1-hour period is a 10-year storm, and whatever 1 over 0.85 is, that's what a 20, so it's like 2.5. It's not like it's double or triple. And I have a feeling that the Board of Commissioners is really not well-versed in, I think they should be reintroduced to what it means, the difference, because I think once you understand it, and then once the complexities get in, you may change your mind as far as, does that make sense?
Well, but we just had a case where that was not true. So the Banbury Francis project is where I'm taking my information from, where there was an absolute line drawn that this project will not move forward if it does not control the 25-year storm. And if that's the case on that project, why would we think it's going to be different here?
I think, so the Ithan Creek watershed, the study that the how Banbury Francis came about, that was, the concept was to address the 25-year storm, if I recall correctly, whereas the township-wide assessment was the 10-year 1-hour storm, if I recall correctly. So the 25-year storm was not really examined for the township-wide assessment, from what I recall. Also, I think we have to take into account, is something flooding every 6 months? Well, then even, addressing a 5-year storm would make a significant difference. If something's, flooding once every 5 years, then yeah, maybe we want to make sure it's at least a 25-year to make some significant impact. I think it would vary from project to project.
If I could.
I'm not saying I support the 25-year storm as a design minimum criteria by any means. However, it seems to me that the political decision had been made that that's the way we treat stormwater in Radnor Township. And if that's the case, then we need to get that clarified before we can move forward with recommendations that conflict with it.
The way to go forward is to present a project that addresses a 10-year storm and say, are you telling me that because we can't meet 25, you don't want to do this project? Because the only way to put the question to the test is to present them a project that addresses a 10-year storm but doesn't address a 25-year storm and say, okay, so you're choosing not to do this? Did I hear that right? Does that make sense? Do you understand what I'm saying? In other words, test the system. Make them make the decision. Don't make it an abstract criteria up front. Present them a project that solves the problem for a 10-year storm, and then say, are you going to say no to this?
You're saying.
Could I say?
I would rather ask them, are you entertaining projects at the 10-year level? Because I don't want to.
It's too abstract. You need to present a project.
Well, I don't want to be in conflict with the people who are township.
Did you think they're right?
What I'm saying is the Board of Commissioners are the ones who make the decision. We advise them, but we take direction from them. And the direction has been a 25-year storm. If they want to continue that, then that's their prerogative.
Don't forget.
I don't want to make an assumption. I want to get that direction directly from the Board of Commissioners because I don't want to waste my time entertaining ideas that aren't on the table.
Don't forget, the Banbury Way came out initially was going to be a 10-year storm. We were told to move it to 25.
I was there at the meeting, and the sense I got, and I can go back and look at the video or whatever, but this was way back when it was approved. The sense I got was, man, let's go for 25 because that would be great. That was the thinking I heard. It wasn't that there was any considered technical criteria.
But then it became the criteria to be met in order to move forward.
So then,
so if we don't have different direction,
how it should. All right, I'm fine to go back and ask them, but I think in the abstract they're going to say we're going to go for 25 because that sounds great. But when you come up with a project that addresses a 10-year storm and can't address the 25, I think that puts it in concrete terms that makes them face their thinking and decide whether or not it's rational or not.
I'm an engineer, I speak in facts. We have been provided no direction by the Board of Commissioners. We have been provided no direction by Radnor Township. It's our desire and my desire that we do what's best for Radnor. The difference between it's not that a 10-year storm, you design something for a 10-year storm and it fails in a 25-year storm. It doesn't provide as much flood reduction, right? But it still reduces flooding, and that's our goal. So I think we should we can continue this presentation, but the results of our 2.5 year or 2 years or whatever long time it took us to do the Radnor Township-wide assessment, we spent $257,000 on an assessment to provide us specific modeling for every place in Radnor that has flooding. And it was done on a 10-year storm. And we know where it floods, and we have been provided, I think, a very concise group of projects that are listed in criteria order and predict how much flooding impact can be expected on a per dollar per cubic volume of water reduction. So again, I'm going to repeat it, and you're going to keep hearing me say it. I'm sick of modeling. We got to move on. You can give this to a contractor, and all you're asking for, which is right, is you're asking, and we should recommend to the Board of Commissioners whether they should require in their RFP that it be a 10-year storm or a 25-year storm. And the requirement that they made in moving from a 10 to a 25-year storm caused delay and additional spending by T&M to redesign that program several times until they got to consensus. Okay, and it's a simple thing in my mind, is that if you want to do a 25-year storm, then you need to disrupt more soil, more roads, and more people. And if you want to do 10, you can get by with a little less, because now you don't need as much storage, you don't need as big of pipes, right? So it's, maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but
I don't disagree with anything you said. I think that's true, everything you said. It also, if you go between 25 and a 10-year, it dictates how quickly you can move on to the next project because the cost is higher. That's a township decision that doesn't really lie with us. So I'd prefer to get the direction from the Board of Commissioners rather than be in conflict with what their goals are.
I don't think there's a specific goal.
It was pretty clear on the Banbury Francis
on the Banbury
project
Francis
that
way.
25-year was going to be the only acceptable outcome.
And
so
I
if that
didn't-
is a township-wide decision, I'd like to know now, and I'd like to work with that decision.
what you do differently, though? I guess I don't understand. I mean,
Then we would have to be looking at the 25-year storm when they go to design it. So this one
Okay.
may fall down to the bottom because the other three have the feasibility at a 25-year storm and this one does not. Just for example.
yeah, we should keep going because we're at a, I'm ready to go hunting and you're ready to do more gun selection. So, like, I have all the information I need to go and say they should do that project.
But if we had a town mayor and you had the decision in your hand, then that would be fine. But that's not the way Radnor works.
I just
So if
don't
we make
think that-
recommendations that don't make sense to the board, then we're in conflict with them. That's not what I'm looking to do.
This project could be a 25-year storm. It could. You just may need to go, and when the engineers came in, they may say, hey, Radnor, the only way we can make this a 25-year storm on West, and you're right, it is, it's West Avenue, is that you need to get an easement from AT&T because we need to take their whole lot up and put a big storage facility under it. But if you want a 10-year storm, then we can do it without AT&T at all because we can rip up the West Avenue, and they're the decisions that come on after you go and you put this out to bid and you get an engineering firm working the solution.
Wouldn't put it out to bid if it required an easement for the entire parking lot of the AT&T. That's my point, and because that's not meeting
look,
our goals to stay
Regina,
within Radnor
I think
property.
you have a firmer sense of what the Board of Commissioners asking for than I do. I don't understand that as a firm goal. I understand as a goal that came from Banbury Francis Way, and that was the extent of it. I'm happy to go back and get some clarification from them.
Yeah, I do want that clarification.
Okay.
So we can move on,
But,
though. I don't
yeah,
want
all
to
right.
delay your presentation.
All right. I just think it's worth pushing the envelope. What are they going to do, fire us? I mean, push the envelope. Why not be the people who declare this is what we should do, not what they're telling us to do?
I work for clients like New Jersey DOT. If they told me to design for the 100-year storm, I wouldn't come back at them with a 50-year.
I don't think they've said
That's
that.
just not the way
Yeah.
I operate, so I can't really.
Okay, okay.
One comment, though, too, is that some of these projects don't eliminate the flooding for a 10-year storm necessarily, or 25, or whatever we're talking about. These are about reduction, and you still may have water in the streets for some of these, projects. I mean, for instance, the South Wayne, I forget, I think that
Good point,
basin-
Paige.
that
We're not
basin only
actually
takes a
eliminating
2-year
flooding.
storm or
We're
something.
just reducing it, and it's not necessarily gone in the 10 years. Here's what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay, so good point.
There is no such thing as stormwater elimination.
Right.
There is no such
What I'm
thing.
trying to say is the 10-year storm will still have flooding in these locations.
Yeah.
Even with the system put in place. It will just be less flooding. It's not eliminated from flooding during that storm event. Okay. Okay, go ahead.
All right, so this is SEPTA. As I'm looking at it, the structure that's drawn here is the parking lot for the public. Now, I have a document that Dan sent me that gave a big picture, and I should have included that in this, but I'll send it to you separately. It's on that computer there.
And I think I think if Dan were here, I think that he did do what we had talked to him about, which was take a plain, you know, a white paper approach and not use our original.
Right.
Yeah, because that green is the parking area, correct? That green?
That's the commuter parking
Okay.
area.
That's
This is what he modeled.
That's currently a potential new start, is what you're saying.
Right, with a bigger system than what was originally thought of.
And that's what that first goal.
Right, okay. So to increase the scope. And so you can see there's Poplar right here. That's the major impact is right there on Poplar. But there's an impact going pretty far down the system. And then Joe said, is there any way that we could get reduction on the other side? You know, so the parking lot down here. And I'm not sure, I have a sense, but I gotta check this, that there actually is drainage from the south side of the lot to the north side of the lot. No, it's underneath the railroad tracks.
There may be some underground piping there, but I think you're flipped watersheds once you've crossed the railroad tracks.
Well, I think this is the switch in the watersheds right here.
Oh, so there must be some kind of, they
Yeah.
must have known there's a pipe connection then, like you were
But it's
saying.
got to be some it's a very limited area. It's basically the parking lot itself, it looks like, is going
Yeah.
under
Yeah, it's
there.
not that big.
Yeah, but even then, that's the high point kind of anyway, right?
So this one's 600K. The original cost was 150K. And then the last is the Radnor Trail. So this had the highest score for stormwater flood reduction. This is 610K. We made this, in our estimation, for the subcommittee, a lower priority because the flooding is not in a common area such as downtown Wayne. And then we'd have to obviously work with Park and Recs to assess the impact. But it has some pretty significant flooding impact. It's the only one that's got the purple color of all the stuff we've been looking at.
Can you clarify, is it flood reduction like per something? You say highest score for stormwater flood reduction. But,
We're summarizing a 200-page report that we were provided a month ago that I'd recommend everybody read, and it should be our Bible.
but here, we're referring to the flood reduction overall or
Well,
flood
this was the
reduction?
scoring that Dan gave it based on that algorithm he used for flood reduction. And it was, I don't know if it was. They scored things a number of different ways. This was a score that was only based upon our agreed upon top priority of reducing stormwater flooding.
It will take the most flooding off.
That's right. But the
Okay.
reason we made it number 4, as we said, is while it said that, this area is not, I mean, you know, it could help, but is it help where we really need it, or is it, you know? When all of these, when he says highest score, he specifically, that's right, he broke out one table, and that's the table we used because we thought that was most important.
Okay. So, again, here's our goals, a list of 2018 capital improvement projects. And then going forward, so here we are, public comment and SWMEC input. We're presenting to the whole group. This is what we're recommending, and obviously we'd have to agree as a group if this makes sense. prepare a meeting and a memo and then a presentation for the board to see. Maybe this question about, 10-year versus 25-year storm is part of that. And then get on the Board of Commissioners' agenda in June to present what we'd like to do.
So I guess in line with that different design storm discussion, these are projects we would recommend knowing that they're part of an incremental approach that down the road, when partnered with other projects, could eventually get to the point where we eliminate the flooding. So none of these on their own, except maybe the Radnor Trail, might actually eliminate some flooding in a particular location.
Again, these are for us, low cost, relatively large impact, obvious choices. And it's like,
But very different than Banbury Francis in that it doesn't
Right.
address fully the
Right.
flood concerns in those locations. It's an incremental,
Right.
it's a first step.
yeah.
In that case, it really isn't we just have to present it in the way that we think these incremental steps are good places to start.
Now I understand. I'm sorry.
So, I mean, again, because we have such a shortened time frame and we can't have a full discussion about some of these larger projects and how they might be modified to be more feasible or whatever, this is just what we're going with right now.
Or affordable projects is
And
what
they're
you're pointing
affordable,
out
and
here.
all of these could be done with the current budget.
The design can be done. You're
I
saying the
think- no,
construction
we have 4 million or something lying about.
by the end of 18?
Well, I mean,
Soon
yeah,
as you
so
can-
in 18, these are ones we were saying, maybe you start the design now and then get them done in 18, or.
So these could be constructed in 18 within our 18 budget?
Right.
Yeah,
Oh,
we had the money.
fabulous.
That'll be the
Okay,
goal.
yeah, that's a very responsible way to make a recommendation then.
But now I understand, I'm sorry I was dense, now I understand your comment. So then, Banbury Francis, Radnor gave that contractor, or that RFP, a specific requirement on stormwater reduction. How would we do that with these programs?
Well, these we would be looking, I think, differently, and we'd have to have alternatives, and we'd have to have costs connected with the level of remediation provided. How much disruption is it for the township? How much cost is the construction? How long will it take can it be phased? Things like that. Like the green streets, I could see maybe you could phase it and move it further and further
Right
out. But
upstream.
you don't do the whole, unless there's a cost savings, you don't do the whole construction at once. You may do the design and then phase it over time so that you're not shutting down that neighborhood the entire summer.
So that if we went back to our T&M thing, there would be a feasibility portion of their engineering design that would give the township several options that would be more or less, disruptive, so to
And like
speak.
you said earlier, there would be the opportunity to just pull the plug on it if it just isn't going the way we wanted it.
Right. That's,
So
I
the
think,
w-
part
the
of
way the
what we
contract would
say.
have to be written is that, based upon the initial findings, Radnor will make a determination whether or not to go into a final design and construction documents on any of those.
Oh, so you could, that's
have
a
a
good
trigger
idea.
out.
So you could do a feasibility option portion of the engineering, which was driven to a point, and then you could down select to one and do the construction on just the one. Or not do construction on
decide
any.
it's a bad road to follow and we're going to stop there.
No, that's a great idea. Now I see what you're saying. Okay. Yeah.
So then I guess I'm not as opposed to the potential easement situation for more, because that would be something
That
that
would come
could
out.
be done in parallel if the township wants to pursue these potential
Right.
situations. You can, if you start at the same starting point, it doesn't have to be a delay.
Right.
So what do we do?
So I think what we're looking for is a motion that, let me back it up here. See how fast I can get through these. That these four listed in order of priority would be the projects that we would recommend to the Board of Commissioners be pursued for the 2018 budget.
So right now, as far as I see it, number 3 kind of is already in process, right?
Well, no, it's
Well,
actually not.
Technically, it's supposed to be, right? It's supposed to be under design.
But just back up a second.
So I'd almost want to pull that out as a separate.
Joe's point about clean sheet is here. I mean, there is a design for a much smaller system in place. There's no approval for a project that looks at the SEPTA area in a bigger way.
Well, I guess the only reason I would even want it on that list, since it isn't Radnor property, is that there's that connected funding with it. That's why I'd like to kind of pull it away from this list, which is different. That number 3 has $100,000 committed by SEPTA, whereas these don't. So maybe we want to identify it a little bit separately because it has that element of matching funding.
So you're not saying take it off, you just want to
No, I
make
just
it-
think it's a totally different thing
Because
because it
it's
has some
not our
matching
property,
funding and it's
and it's
not
got
Radnor. Yeah.
It's a good point. Could we go back to that slide?
Sure.
So if we put on the SWIMAC recommendation, 3rd highest priority, and then the next bullet said something like, recommending, although not owned by Radnor, recommending due to, existing agreement or whatever that SEPTA is,
Commitment of
Right.
$100,000 from SEPTA for construction.
So in other words, spell
add
it out
that
more,
bullet.
then, because
It
that's
doesn't
why we put
necessarily
it
not
on.
have to be on that list, but I just want an asterisk
Asterisk it,
explaining
Then we
why
could leave it
kind
on,
of.
then we could leave it on the list, but just be more clear why we put it on there.
Yeah, and I want it to be clear that it's not something that would be sitting there probably without that money.
Well, it still is, I mean, it's part of what, in us in Gulf Creek would like to see.
I'm not opposed to doing something there. It's just we know the added difficulties because it's not Radnor Township property.
Yeah, okay.
And you could argue that any of these 4, we implemented the incentive program, but we never implemented for homeowners, but we never have implemented yet a credit program for ODCs. And
I think what we found is that our fees aren't high enough to make it make sense. However, I do have another question. I don't want to forget it, but I know you're still in a thought too. Do you want to go?
I was only going to say that if one of these 4 got to the level where a proposal came back and it would be logical to do an ODC, I don't know why we couldn't, begin an ODC program that was targeted on programs that through modeling and simulation and analysis and engineering have proven that there's a real benefit, high benefit to the township. And you would do a targeted ODC to Company X because they have a big parking lot in.
Charles, you're shaking your head there.
Well, I just had a quick thought before I lose it, is that, is there anything preventing us from using the $100,000 on the Green Street and just walking away from SEPTA?
I thought it was specific to,
I don't know that it had to be used on their property. I think it was to help manage water around their property. Because that
So we can
area
ask- We
flows.
can ask the
Yeah.
question, I guess put that on the list there.
Because if we could do something with their water off their property, it would be much more feasible.
I see what you're saying.
I'm just looking for a way to move it forward.
Charles, what were you going to say?
If we try and bring in another element, it's going to extend our time for whatever we're trying to do.
You mean as far as credit and things like that? Yeah, I'm not a supporter. We just don't charge the fees Philadelphia charges. It just doesn't make sense. And other cities where they have credit programs. And those are typically in combined sewer situations, which we're not in. And they're under, court orders to get their flows out of our rivers, let's put it that way. overflows out of our rivers.
So, do we need a motion here or something? Or do we just agree? We're going to write a memo?
I make a motion that, and we'll put it on the table and we'll take comment, that we make recommendation to the Board of Commissioners for the 2018 budget process as depicted in this presentation.
It would be each of these would be each RFP would be a two-part that would describe a feasibility, an engineering feasibility that would allow trade-offs between, the storm water that they would.
Well, a two-step process of feasibility and then a design and construction plan permitting. That would be step 2. However, I don't see why this couldn't be based upon, input from the Board of Commissioners as to which, if any, of these projects they want to move forward on, could be, the entire RFP could be under one umbrella. I don't see you have to have 4 RFPs. It doesn't really, it's not necessary.
Oh, yeah, you could just do one.
One engineering firm, right?
Well, it's got some efficiencies. Imagine 4 different consultants trying to coordinate all at the same time with Steve and us and the board, and it would just get crazy.
That makes good sense. So all 4 of them would go out on one RFP.
Or any of the 4 that the board sees fit to move
Yeah,
forward
yeah.
on. Anyone want a second?
Oh, second.
How about some public comment?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I happened to flip on the TV and I was watching this debate going on. I have a couple of comments to make on it. One, you were talking at one point there about a Green Street on West Avenue. And I heard Great American Pub mentioned. Well, if you look at the CH2M report, because it is a farce, they were not talking about that part of West Avenue. They were talking from the AT&T building down to, Francis. They were talking about a very small area. To put Green Street down all the way to the Great American Pub, you'd have to be cutting out all parking down that way and shutting down the area for business. Besides the fact that it's on such a steep grade, it would be questionable whether a Green Street would even work there. And on the upper part of West Avenue, there's very, very limited drainage on West Avenue that would be picking up. Most of once you get down, there's a Banbury and it's Francis. I forget the streets sometimes. Once you get past that, only less than half of West Avenue even drains over to the south side. The rest of it is going to go back towards the railroad tracks. If you're only picking up half that street, what are you picking up? Virtually nothing as far as the Green Street. Why do you spend money on it? Well, they said CH2M with their recommendations. Oh, this is on our scoring. Their scoring is la-la land. The scoring should be based primarily on where is the most potential damage to be done, and then how can we take care of that? Not, well, we can put a Green Street here where there's really no damage being done. Yes, it could be annoying once every 15 or 20 years that one of the streets has a little bit of water on it, but the curbs in most of those areas are so low it's going to run off into the grass anyway. As far as whether it's a 5-year storm, a 10-year storm, or 25-year storm, you can't take what the rainfall is for a day as a measuring stick. You could get 4 inches of rain spread out over 24 hours, it's nothing. It just runs off. If you get a rainstorm, it's going to be 3 inches, but you're going to get 2.5 inches within a half hour. Now you've got something to talk about. It's the intensity, not necessarily the duration, or whether it's a 10-year or 15 or 25-year. But to design for 10-year, when the difference in peak water flow or peak rainwater, I think is just about a ½ inch difference. So if you're going to design for 2 inches of depth, it's not going to cost twice as much. It may cost 10% more to go for the extra ½ inch. So to even consider spending large amounts of money for a 10-year storm when you can, for a little bit more, go for a 25-year storm. And I see nothing wrong in some areas saying we're going to look at a 50-year storm. But you're the advisory committee. The commissioners shouldn't be advising you on what to do. They can give you some directions, but you've got to be advising them on what to do. You've got to take the bull by the horns. To sit here and say, well, we have to get direction from them. They've given you the direction of being an advisory board. Advise them. Use your good judgment. Now, I think several of you up here are engineers. Is that correct? Who would be an engineer? You?
All the
I'm the only non-engineer.
Okay. So
Everybody else is an
So
engineer.
we got 4 engineers. 4 engineers plus a non-engineer, he can keep notes. You guys, instead of sitting around on a dais like that, I think you'd be working much more effectively sitting around a table and having a free discussion. But you've got to advise them based upon what your gut feeling is. You want to accomplish something. You're not working here to try to please them. You can never please a whole board of anything. You might please 1 or 2 and you're going to get the rest mad at you. But you've got to exercise your moral authority and your statutory authority to be a strong advocate for one thing or another. Please, do that. And as far as some of the projects, the septic station, where exactly are they talking about this pit, detention place? On the CH2M report, it says SEPTA parking lot. Well, SEPTA has 2 parking lots. Which side of the tracks are they talking about?
had a graphic showing the small parking lot on the north side of the
Okay.
station
Okay, the north side.
was, I think, identified.
That was what was modeled.
Okay.
That was what was modeled by Dan.
So the area on the right-hand side, once you've gone under the train overpass, heading north on North Wayne.
What I told them was that Dan sent me a graphic yesterday, and I forgot to pull it up and put it on the presentation, so I'm actually going in here and trying to find
You
it.
did have it highlighted, though, when you,
For that modeling, yeah.
yeah.
For Dan's modeling, not necessarily the original.
There's two thoughts out there. One, there was an original plan quite some time ago that hasn't moved forward for a number of reasons. The second thought was the one that Paul showed on the map. I don't know if you got to see it. It's that small parking lot.
Okay. Because, as I said, CH2M, when they say the Wayne Station, wouldn't you expect that they would say which part of the Wayne Station? Especially when they're two greatly diverse areas. And yes, part of the south side of that is on the Gulf Creek Basin. Now, when you start going down West Avenue, once you get past Banbury, all of West Avenue is, I think, Creek Basin. So if you're doing something right at the top of there, at the crest of the hill, you don't have much room for water to accumulate. So when I read that, I mean, after all, if we take the watered down CH2M version, at $1 million a year that the Stormwater Fund brings in, 20 years. Well, if you go to the gold-plated version, well, you got 32 or 34 years. So,
I found this document. I'll put it up there on the screen.
Two quick comments, and I personally agree with like 98% of what you said, but 98%. I'm an engineer. Two quick clarifications. There. One is that West Avenue, I just want you to be clear that the proposal for West Avenue really does not impact or improve the flooding on West Avenue. It decreases the amount of water that is going from West Avenue to the train tracks, under the train tracks, because there's a big pipe there, into North Wayne Field and in North Wayne. So that's the reason for that. And any of these designs.
Which part of West Avenue are you talking about?
Well,
we're talking about a Green Street.
That's the
Yeah,
second.
where you were saying further west, not in town by the pub, but further west on West Avenue.
But I think any of these proposals would get into detailed engineering design, and that's what we had talked about just a minute ago, where specific different proposals would be brought forward at a detailed level that would say what you would do and wouldn't do. And that would be a perfect time for you to then,
Okay, now West Avenue right now, from the corner where the AT&T building is at Banbury, from there on down to the bank down there, West Avenue drains down that way, and there are storm inlets down there. There's two of them, one on the other side of the street, which go into that 22-inch pipe that's underground.
and so that would be the idea, is to capture some of that.
It's easily done.
Yeah, well,
I think the reason that project is something that's under consideration is that it could be a pretty low-cost project relative.
But low cost is a relative thing.
Right, so it's an
Low cost,
incremental
but
step
produces
rather than
no
a
value.
complete solution. It's a partial solution that needs to be combined with other pieces.
and it was a low-cost, high value. In other words, the modeling done by our professional engineers indicated that it would produce, per dollar spent, a high volume reduction per dollar spent. So it's, now you could argue that the model isn't right and the results of CHM2 aren't right, but we specifically,
arguing-
I'm just saying, our subcommittee specifically looked at, they had a depiction in that report that was just flood volume per dollar spent. And so we went to the ones that were the highest cost benefit, right? The highest benefit for the lowest cost as being good initial ones to look at.
But that doesn't, what they were showing on that does not necessarily say that the most value, that it's the most value to the people in the township. And it's very little value to the people in the township.
Well, This
If
is,
you don't collect any of that water there, and the rain stops, in 15 or 20 minutes, that water's gone anyway, and know where a lot of it's going to go? Down towards the Wawa, where you're putting the new basin in down there. So that water is being captured.
Again, we can, but again, do you have West Wayne up? Which one do you, oh, that's the parking lot.
That's SEPTA.
Again, the West Avenue is to stop the water from, or reduce the water going over to North Wayne. Not that it couldn't provide an auxiliary benefit for the Lancaster Avenue side, but it really was meant to reduce the water going into North Wayne and the flooding that those folks see.
But the fact is, have you gone over there and really walked that area and looked at the elevations and all? Darn little of that water will be going over towards the tracks. And that water, well, I was supposed to have a meeting with Bob Zakowski today to discuss a plan. My plan has not been brought before you guys or the commissioners yet, but my plan will capture that water with no problem. And it's going to capture a significant volume of water. I'm not worried so much about capturing all this water and holding it because we can't. We don't want to anyway. Yes, some people want to capture it all, I know. God bless you. But the objective is to retain it and for a period of time and gradually let it flow out. We're talking about from the AT&T building up past the end of West Avenue, the other side of Eagle, we're talking 55 acres. We're not talking, 3 or 4 acres at the AT&T building. So a workable plan has to take that whole thing into account. It's quite easily done. You just have to be creative. Think outside the box. Thank you.
Thanks.
Any questions?
I have seen your letter to the commissioners online. I have read that.
I'm sorry?
I've read your letter to the commissioners
okay.
online. Yes, but thank you for your comments.
Okay, thank you.
Can I put this down? Because I was typing notes. Yeah.
To be clear, so here is the map that Dan sent me, which is the augmented design for the SEPTA lot that he had proposed. Your concept, thank you. And so it's got a system in both the lower parking lot and then an upper parking lot, which is where the Amtrak repair or maintenance area is, just so that's clarified.
Hi. Thanks again. I'll leave your picture up. I'll just move from the side if that's okay. So I'm going to try to, there was a lot of really good conversation that happened that I want to comment on, so I'm going to be sort of taking you back a little bit. But the first thing that I did want to say was the CH2M Hill full report that was done, that I can't find that anywhere, and I want that. So if somebody could provide that, as far as I understand, it's a public document. But, what my right to know is going in, I guess it missed the cutoff. It's not here because the township has denied you guys appropriate support, which you really are entitled to. And so, therefore,
The final report is in a Dropbox. Could we just give her access to the Dropbox? I mean, it's a public document.
Well, I think we need to make it available to everyone.
We asked at
That's
the
what I
last
thought.
meeting it be made available in 24 hours to the public. And
Yeah, and I know you had, and I just searched for it again, and I thought maybe there had been a glitch, but I've heard it, referenced a number of times. So I did send another email to Melissa Kahn and copied Bob to ask if I could have it. But if there's anything you could do,
on behalf
I'd
of
really
the township,
appreciate
I
that.
sincerely apologize. I really
That's
do.
very
I
kind
mean,
of
that
you,
was, no,
so.
that's,
Maybe Commissioner R has it, and he'll be willing to email it to me. You don't have it either? Okay. So I'm glad we've got informed decision-making happening at the commissioners' level if they're not even getting the report. I did want to just go back a little bit to the discussion of the criteria. Was that a fly? To a discussion of the criteria. I thought the list of criteria that Paul had put up and whoever helped it, did you work with him on that, Joe? I thought
Joe
that was
Page.
really, and Paige, that was great. And I was really sad to hear some of the discussion seeking to remove some of those criteria. So I want to go back and reinforce the importance of them. The one modification, though, I really wanted to make was to the characterization of looking at flood reduction, prioritizing flood reduction. I would suggest that flood reduction is the wrong language. Flood damage reduction is what you're looking to accomplish. Reducing an inch of water in somebody's backyard that's jumped out of the stream is not your goal. Your goal is getting it out of people's houses, right? And that gets captured by flood damages. And in fact, if you focus on flood damages, then that's another indirect way to get at some of the other issues that were put up there, like number of homes and things. Because if you're talking about number of homes and businesses that are impacted over a longer reach, that flood damage number tends to go up, right? And so if you don't want to count businesses and homes, because that's too complicated, if you really are looking at flood damages, it's another way to capture a lot of those impacts. So anyway, I think it's very important. Flooding, as I think was, oh yeah,
So, but how would flood damage control affect, like, South Wayne Avenue in front of the firehouse?
yeah, so in terms of flood damages, to the extent that that water is going into a building, right, into buildings,
No,
that's how
like,
you get
just say
flood
that-
damages. And that would, but it might be that then becomes a different characterizations, right? So you might have flood damage reduction, and then you might have a specific articulation for road flooding, which I do know was part of the earlier
Right.
discussion. And but that would be separate.
I think you could probably say flood impacts, reduction of flood impacts, and that would capture all of that. It would capture safety, real estate, lost time, services. It would.
You can do that. I think the one thing, and I think that's a fine modification, the one thing I just really think we need to be clear is, frankly, if you're going to be spending a lot of money to help people protect people's landscaping and the mulch they had delivered to their backyard, right, that is a flood damage. But that, I don't think that that's what, we want to be accomplishing. So I do think there also needs to be some definition around whether you call it flood impacts or flood damages. However it is you do it, there needs to be some clarity. You're talking about structural impacts. You're talking about damage to or flooding in roads that is impeding safety issues or other, issues like that. But I think that's a good modification. Just some definition also would be helpful. Because some people do get really, really angry about the water that's in their backyard. And the one thing, though, too, I was disturbed by, confused by, that in the flood reduction discussion, there seemed to be a lot of support for flood reduction, but there was no request that in using that as a criteria, that had to be quantified. But then when we started talking about runoff volume reduction and water quality benefits, suddenly there seemed to need to be a number associated with that, for that to be included in the priority list, the criteria list. And I don't think that's fair, and I don't think it's appropriate, and I don't think it's necessary. You're talking about, prioritization. And so you're trying to identify the qualities that you're looking for. And for each different project, the level of flood damage reduction, the level of water quality benefit volume reduction will come out in the discussion. And sometimes you'll get some good figures early on in the analysis, and sometimes it will come out later, and sometimes, of course, it will change between your initial desire to go with the project and the ultimate design, because you do decide that the water table's too high or something. But this is about criteria that's helping you in the first instance prioritize projects. And when you're talking about a quality of projects like the West Avenue Green Streets, they will have volume reduction, they will have water quality benefits, and they will have flood damage reduction benefits or flood impact reduction benefits. That immediately rises it to the top of the pile, even though you can't quantify each one of those items. And I want to say that, when you look at communities across the nation that are identifying criteria that they're going to use to help them select projects, all of these are amongst the top highest priority items. So I don't understand why every other community can do it, but Radnor Township can't. Of course we can. And so I think I put in a very strong vote for, in the criteria that you have as your highest priority criteria guidance for selecting projects, flood impact, flood damage reduction, however you want to define that, volume reduction. And remember, volume reduction does not mean infiltration necessarily. There's a lot of ways to reduce volume. That was our big battle with Villanova. They didn't want to infiltrate. Okay, you don't want to infiltrate, but they came up with another strategy that had to do with evaporation. In the city of Philadelphia, there are a lot of places they're not infiltrating, but they are doing volume reduction, right? So there are many, many ways to do volume reduction. So we need to not think soils and water tables. We need to be thinking volume reduction and the wealth of opportunities that brings. Water quality benefits must be a high priority, and along with that, of course, the MS4 permit obligations. I do want to clarify, I do think erosion should be brought to the top, and I just wanted to clarify, Paul, the erosion, it's not that you're building a project to like riprap or something that stops erosion. The erosion comes in there that and when you increase the volume of water in a creek, like through a detention basin, where you're increasing the volume of water and you're lowering the peak, but you're extending the peak over a longer period of time, one of the ramifications of that is downstream you can have increased erosion, washing away of public and private lands, which of course is washing away public and private lands, but you then also undermine trees. So, trees start to fall in. You then bring all that sediment into the stream. That is a pollution problem. And that is one of the problems that needs to be resolved for compliance with MS4 permit obligations. So by using strategies that reduce volume, not just reduce peak, you also, for example, get to the issue of erosion, which gets to your pollutant reduction goals. So that's why I say erosion should go up, but you can capture that in water quality if you want. So that was my vote for the criteria to keep them, essentially the highest criteria you put up to keep them, except for, that I disagree with you on this issue of ownership. I don't think you should be limiting your projects to just township-owned properties. I think you should be looking for best solutions. But if you are going to limit it to township-owned properties, I would just suggest that to the township that school district properties are not township-owned properties. So if you're going to go down that path, you should go down that path. Oh, and I understand why you're making it second tier, but I do think amenity matters, right? So like the projects that are going to make Radnor Township more beautiful matters, and that has market value benefits to communities and livability benefits, and makes Radnor more attractive to businesses. And frankly, I know Radnor since I was 1 year old. We moved here when I was 18 months old from India, and Radnor is nowhere near as beautiful as it used to be, and it's quickly going downhill fast. So anything we can do with stormwater to help beautify Radnor and make people want to live here again and businesses want to come here again rather than leave, which is what I hear a lot of because of the loss of open space, I think is a good value added from every dollar spent. I do want to I did hear, I'm sorry, I heard you say you don't appreciate the CH2M Hill report. I really appreciate the CH2M Hill report. I think that they did a good job. Not you. I was speaking with my fellow resident. I really think they did do a good job. They did a lot of hard work. They provided a lot of valuable information, so I want to put it in a vote of confidence for that. And I also, though, do want to support the remarks that I think it's a big mistake for the committee to try to glean what you think the commissioners want to hear and then give it to them. That's not, then you might as well not exist. Like, there's really no point to just be a rubber stamp, because the truth is you're not going to know what they want to hear anyway, right? Like, that's a moving target for many reasons, good reasons and bad. It's just the reality. So I think this idea, that the subcommittee that came up with these recommendations was advancing of, let's make the best selection, what we think is best for the township, and recommend that to the commissioners and support that to the commissioners. And if the commissioners choose to reject it, well, that tells you something. But I don't think that you want to try to figure out what they want and just give it to them, because then there's no value in having an advisory committee. And frankly, you're wasting your time, I think. So I think that was an important point. I had a lot more notes on that, but I won't burden you with that. I think you understand where I'm coming from. And then I also really did want to make that vote of confidence, for what the point you were making, Joe. You're not going to go around Radnor Township with 25-year projects, 50-year projects, 100-year projects and solve flooding problems in Radnor Township. You're just not going to do it. And those larger storms, you're not going to solve those larger storms. They're going to continue. The water's going to continue to fall, and you're going to continue to have flooding. The way you're going to help Radnor residents all the way around, from a flood damage reduction perspective and from a water quality perspective and a safety perspective and a quality of life perspective, is doing exactly what you were talking about at the very beginning, is going throughout Radnor Township and doing projects large and small that incrementally reduce the volume of stormwater runoff going into our creeks and getting dumped on downstream communities. And every piece that you put in that puzzle is going to be value added. But if you think that you're going to go in and just do 25-year projects and the like, then frankly, you might as well hang it up as well, because you're not going to find them. It's not going to happen. You're going to try to put a couple of projects in. People are still going to flood, and then they're going to come back and be angry at you and the commissioners, and people are going to ask what's happening. It really is, and I think CH2 explained this, and I'm sure you've heard this elsewhere. It really is the one-year storm, the two-year storm that should be the focus of the majority of your attention and effort. And because that's where 90+% of or when and where 90% plus of the rain falls. So if you capture that water and you appropriately deal with that water by keeping it out of the stream, either putting it in the ground or putting it in the air or putting it in the vegetation, then you are solving the majority of the problems that happen day in and day out in Radnor Township. And then you try to add additional capacity to that to get to the 10-year storms and to the 25-year storms to the greatest degree possible, recognizing there are going to be limited opportunities for that. So I put a really big vote of confidence for that idea of don't just chase the 25-year storm. And if that's what the commissioners want from you, then you will hear me and others in the township who are knowledgeable support you in saying that that's ridiculous and that the commissioners are doing a disservice to the community if that's what they're going to demand. So thank you very, very much for your hard work and the great discussion, and I hope the feedback was helpful.
Thank you. So there was a motion.
Yeah, the motion was to move those 4 projects forward as part of the budgeting process, correct? That's what we're doing
To
here.
recommend them to the Board of Commissioners for the 2018 budget. Second?
that already?
Okay.
I'm good with that, but I'd like to make an amendment or a discussion or a... You know how procedural I am. I guess, being Mr. Pusher, when I hear 2018 budget, that sounds like next year, because 2017, and I guess I don't agree with that. I think that these things should be moved immediately. I think we should begin work on an RFP if we agree with this tomorrow, and 2017 dollars should be spent, not, so while I think putting them in the budget for 2018 is appropriate, that would be as a construction project.
So you want to amend that to say, we want to recommend design of the two-step process, design process of those 4 projects at this time and construction for 2018.
Yeah, well, and if you could argue that, yes, or you could argue that do we need a vote, or do we just agree that we have a documented approach that we would just like to brief the Board of Commissioners on as soon as possible, and we all agree that the approach is, and maybe that's the vote, that we immediately move forward with 4 projects that they would decide if 1, 3, or 4 would get in, and the engineering would start this year, and then those, whatever that subset is, or the whole set, would go into the 2018 budget for, construction or wherever we were at that point. Does that make? Because I just don't, 2000, it just seems too far away.
I just feel like we have a deadline for the budget, and that's what our discussion was about. So let's make that budget motion, and then let's
Okay.
make a separate motion. How about that?
Okay.
Make it
Sounds
simple,
good.
right?
Good. I'm good with the first one then.
Okay, so the recommendation is construction
Yeah.
of those projects in the 2018 budget, right? Do we have, Mr. Budget, do we have money left in 2017?
I don't know, 3 million?
So we can say design now.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Without having to tap into.
We
Right.
could start
Future
construction now.
Okay, so let's do that. We'll say the construction, we're recommending to put in the 2018, and you can put that in your table and do your budget.
Okay.
Does that
I
all
don't
make
do
sense?
budgets anymore.
What?
You missed that.
That's been taken out of our.
Our purview.
So who's
Yeah.
going to do it?
Well, no, with the latest amendment to what the stormwater, it's good.
So wait, are we doing one for this year or not?
No, after like 2 months, then we don't have to meet till like
So we
next.
are doing it for
We don't have to meet
2018,
until
but
next
that's
May.
it.
No, we
We
have
are
to-
making recommendations, and the staff is making recommendations, and then
Troublemaker.
the Board of
guess
Commissioners
I'm-
will take that information and
I'm confused as
do
to
as they please
what
with
our
it.
goal is for this meeting right now, what we're doing then.
We've been asked as our primary task, ooh, that was a nice rhyme, to provide recommendations for the Board of Commissioners for what should be done with a stormwater fee in the 2018 budget. And the goal would be to get that done by July, because that's when the administration will submit their budget. And so we're making that recommendation. And then going forward for 2019 to 2020, each year, that would be one of our primary goals, is to say, what big project should the money be spent on now? That's what we're doing.
The only difference is someone else presents it, basically?
Well,
We can discuss
yeah,
it
we can
next
discuss this later.
time.
I think
Okay,
we'll
so
present
we
I just
can do
wanna
what you,
vote.
we can do what you said. Why don't you reword the motion? I'll take the other one off the table. Reword the motion to basically what you just said.
Why would the
That-
motion be any different? I mean, we're still I heard your
We're-
motion and agreed with it, with
But
my
it's a little
understanding.
different because I thought we were following the old process. So you go ahead and make it the way you just said it. We were requested and et cetera, and then.
Help me understand why it's
But we're
different.
following the old process and we were going to do the proposed budget, et cetera, which we're not. We're just
So,
being
tell me-
asked how to spend the 2018 budget.
Yeah,
so
tell
that
me what
they
your
can
motion
incorporate
was.
that.
I just want to make sure I
So the
understand.
new motion, I guess.
No. What was your old motion?
Well, I was under the understanding that we were following the old procedures
Mm-hmm.
that we had for the past couple of years. So I was thinking we were going to move forward with a budget.
Oh, I see. We're
As
just,
we had in the
yes,
past,
so then the motion
but
would
we're
be
not.
to recommend to the board that these 4 projects be listed in 2018 for construction, I think is what
Yes.
Joe was saying.
Yes.
Okay. That's
That
the-
makes
that's
more
the-
sense
That's
now.
the extent of the
Okay, so that's the new motion.
Okay.
I have rough words on our paragraph that we would send to the Board of Commissioners, and after this meeting, if you'd like to hear that, maybe that'll help.
Yeah.
Based on a technical review of the CHM2 Radnor Township-wide assessment, SWIMAC voted X to Y, we don't know what the vote's going to be, to recommend to the Board of Commissioners that the following 4 stormwater capital improvements programs identified by CHM2 be initiated. South Wayne Avenue, West,
Slight correction, it's CH2M.
CH2, it's minor detail. South Wayne Avenue, West Avenue, Green Streets, Amtrak SEPTA parking lots, and Radnor Trail. We look forward to briefing the Board of Commissioners at their earliest convenience. We will recommend that an RFP for detailed engineering design on the projects you select be initiated immediately with the goal of construction by 2018. The engineering design should take 2 parts, the first part being feasibility on the construct and the amount of flood reduction that can be initiated, blah, 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 like another sentence there that I haven't written yet.
I guess the first would be a feasibility with alternatives. And costs. Reading your statement, so.
That's kind of what,
To Paul?
yeah, back to Paul. Pause while Joe
Second.
writes.
Seconding your motion.
Oh, right. That's good.
Aye.
Can we vote on
Take
that?
the vote on it, all in favor?
Aye.
And it passes 5-0.
I just, just that the first part of the process was to do a feasibility with alternatives, feasibility of multiple alternatives and their costs.
We can hash out.
Yeah. So
Exactly.
I don't think
Which
that
is
really
right.
has to be in there. I mean, that's something we would have to talk
We
about
can
when we
discuss.
discuss it with the board.
Yeah, you're going to have to
Because you
explain what
can't
you're
put it
talking
into
about.
3, 4 words.
Well, you could say
You've got to-
alternative approaches,
Alternative approaches, yeah, that,
because that's really all you're doing. You've got a concept, and you're going to have
now you have
alternative
some,
approaches.
yes, exactly.
And then the board has to say, yes, go with this, go with that.
Yeah, they would be briefed and make a determination on which to pursue, if any. I don't don't think you even have to put that two-step process in
No, I
this
stopped.
at all,
I
so
stopped.
we're good.
Okay, so I think we've covered most of the things that updates at Highview we don't have a cost for yet. Banbury Francis project. For,
I assume they said how much it's going to cost.
right, so the option that they're moving forward with is the one that keeps things entirely within the right-of-way. And the total cost would be, it was 1.335, I think. That included replacement of some sanitary sewer and some water line, and road repair. And so where, say, the sanitary sewer funds would come from, that's not settled yet, where that would come from, but.
That's not included in the.
No, it was 140 for the sanitary sewer replacement, but where that would be funded from hasn't been decided yet.
So the cost that you gave us, the 1.4 million, includes the sanitary sewer?
Yeah, it's 1.3 something, yeah.
Okay, includes it?
Yes.
So it's all inclusive?
That includes it.
Okay, that's all I was.
But that money-
Some of those items
Just
might be
wasn't clear,
funded
yeah.
from places other than the stormwater fund.
Okay.
That's not
But
clear yet.
but really, the overall cost is what we're really,
The overall cost
all
was
coming from the township, so.
1.335, I believe.
okay, thanks.
Paige, would you mind if I had an add-on? You're going to love this, I know. I'll tell you what it is, and then you can tell me whether I should or shouldn't talk about it.
Go ahead.
I personally was surprised that the Swim Act, charter was approved without our seeing it. So,
Well, it was discussed at a prior Board of Commissioners meeting, and it.
I was going to say, but we never saw the final language. So at the prior meeting, I don't know, Phil, but the prior meeting, there was a discussion about 80%, 20% that Don had put in there, and that was gone. So, I mean, there was not final language that we saw.
Not until the packet was released for that commissioners meeting.
right, and so I have written my commissioner, and I have some specific language that I would recommend in making more clear, because we've been joking around throughout the night, because we really don't know what our mission is, in my opinion. And I think that the charter that was signed made it less ambiguous. And I'm not kidding I really think that if you follow that to the letter of the law, come July, we really should consider just disbanding until next May. Because there's really nothing in there for us to do other than recommend projects once a year. But I do think with a slight wording change that we can do what I think the commissioners want us to do, but but it isn't clear in the language it's written. So why don't you just give me a chance to read this paragraph as it's written? There's only one section in the charter that you approved that talks about capital improvements. What it says is that, and we would assume that this is our only role, to recommend capital stormwater projects to be included in the annual budget on or before July 1st of each year, and to assist township staff upon request in establishing the stormwater budget. That's it. So the proposed wording that I forwarded to my commissioner said, stormwater capital improvement programs shall be the primary focus of the Swim Act. On or before July 1st of each year, SWIMAC shall recommend capital stormwater projects to be included by township staff in the stormwater annual budget, with the expectation that 2/3 of Radnor stormwater fee be directed to capital improvements. During the capital improvement engineering design phase, SWIMAC is expected to provide engineering technical expertise to the Board of Commissioners on all proposed designs. Because I think that more clearly reflects what I thought our role was. But I leave it to you whether, and it's really, I think, us to decide whether we think that that is what our role is or isn't. But if it's not that, then
Well, I think you have a good point, and I think based upon what's written in the new revised charter, we really don't meet until next year. I mean, honestly. I mean, I don't think we have another meeting scheduled until next May, and then
We also do have
Review the
responsibility for
projects.
MS4, just to make sure we,
that's not in there.
oh, they took that out
There
too?
is, MS4 is in there, but it just says MS, it's right.
What does it say exactly, from what you were just?
I would make the comment that, and I think that the Banbury Francis Way project demonstrated the usefulness, and I wasn't at the meeting, but I saw the outcome with the 3 proposals that were very specific, that I think was helpful to the Board of Commissioners to, when T&M made their presentation, that it was very clear, this one or this one or this one, and that they had been able to work out the language with us beforehand. That was of utility to the township. So I think the idea that we would be part of the process, not just recommending, but helping advise about the projects along the way is of great benefit to the township.
You know, and I did say in my, and I don't want to embarrass Phil in a positive way, but I did say to my commissioner that I think Phil would be a good representative to talk to because he was at the T&M meeting, and I said how much I appreciate you being there. But T&M brought in 7 different designs that you would have never gotten to the end of. And in 2 hours, we got them to one design with 2 options that we hope allowed you, and it sounded like I didn't listen, allowed you to make a very quick decision. And I also said in my email, and this is by, what I've said is by no means a slam on Steve Norsini, because I think he does a great job. But I think he's overworked, and you have free labor here that can allow you to move these projects forward by working with the engineers, because we do this kind of work, and moving projects forward. So I am very much a proponent on making sure that our charter says what we think it should say, and having the people that elected us into these, or appointed us to these positions, agreeing. And if they don't agree, that's fine. I have plenty of other things I can do, to be honest with you. But I'm willing to waste my time if I don't feel I have clear direction. It's just not worth it. But I'll find.
Yeah, I guess it's a good point. I mean, I don't know what the process is as far as they'd have to repeal that resolution and prepare a new one in order to, is that the process that we're
Well, I mean, the
asking them
other
to undertake?
possibility is to just say, ask Steve, independent of a charter, would you be okay with us meeting with the people who are proposing? And just, de facto, bird dog the projects without a charter. I mean, I think we're stuck too much in the idea that we need permission to do things. I just don't know that we do. I mean,
I think we do. I think, honestly, the direction comes from that description.
I look at it a little differently. And again, maybe we shouldn't be airing this public.
If it's unclear, that's one thing, but if it's clear what your charter is, then.
So the only reason that T&M came before the SWIMAC is because we were told that they will be going before the Board of Commissioners, and we raised holy hell because we wanted them to be here first, because we didn't think it was right for them to go to the Board of Commissioners first. So if you want to continue to, I agree with you, and I like to be pacifist too, but if you want to continue to screw around and have to go and find out who the Radnor administration is meeting with next, now we found out tonight they're going to give you a list of the programs they propose. The actions speak louder than words, and the actions have been clear, and I'm sorry. And I know people don't like me, but.
Why are you saying people don't like you? That's crazy. Well, I
like you, Joe.
I'm
like you
trying
too,
to figure
Pa.
out exactly where we are and where we're going with this. I think what you're pointing out is that the new directive is really only to propose projects annually.
That's right. And I do have the wording. For MS4, it says to provide advice to the Public Works Department and BOC regarding compliance with the PA Stormwater Act and the Township's municipal stormwater system requirements. That's bullet 1. The second bullet is what I just read you. The third bullet is to prepare and implement a credit program. And the fourth program is to provide advice and comments to the Board of Commissioners through regularly scheduled reports.
So I guess the fourth point is the vague one that would perhaps involve us in reviewing projects while under design. Is that what you're saying?
Well,
That's what
So
I'm
you-
saying.
You would,
it
you would think that that should be more clear.
Well, if they gave us a vague statement, why don't we take advantage of it? Why do we need clarity?
because
Well, I
with,
mean, if you're going to spend the time and energy to do something and it's not going to be considered, then you're,
But again, I come back to Banbury Francis Way, that as Joe said, we provided great clarity to the Board of Commissioners that they saw, and whether or not we're
I'm not
recognized for it or
disagreeing with
not.
that, but if someone doesn't want your advice, they're not going to take it. So we need to find out whether that's part of the process or not, as Joe is saying. If it's not part of the process, we have other things we can be doing with our time. If it's part of the process, let's make that clear and put some organization around it so that we know who's doing what and when.
I guess I work in this capacity. I work for the Board of Commissioners and the gentleman who appointed me. I don't work for Radnor Township. And so therefore.
But the other point is that we're really here for the residents.
And the residents,
And that's
obviously.
the point. That's
But-
the reason I'm here.
But-
if the residents want me to do something, but the board isn't going to authorize it, then that's that's a conflicting situation.
Well, that's why I think we need clarity from the board, because
That's a
it's
good
only,
point.
it's only clarity from the board that will require the administration to do what the board asks. I think the lack of clarity works to our disadvantage, not our advantage, because it's not my full-time job to be here and to figure out what's going on day to day.
So more than revising the statement, what you want is the Board of Commissioners to give clear direction as to our role in vetting these projects through the design process.
That's right.
And that's specifically what you're looking for. Because you've used the Banbury Way example. That's what I'm hearing. Is there anything further that you think? I personally don't really think there's any need for a credit program. We don't charge high enough fees. I would rather see that scratched if we were looking at the language.
Yeah, I got my rain barrels and I got my
No,
check.
I think what we have in place is
Right,
fine.
right.
I don't think there is any more work to be done other than just approving them.
Yeah, no,
as they
no,
get
I mean,
submitted.
I don't want any,
Is that what
I'm
it-
personally not looking for any more. I just know that the clarity that was provided for the project as it was being developed was of use to the township. And so, just to let you know, there was a note that went to Elaine before the vote that pointed this out, that this was part of what we did and it was helpful in Banbury. And I don't think there was any discussion of that at the board meeting, but that was pointed out to commissioners at the time. And I don't know how that showed up in the language, if that was what led to item 4 or not. I don't know.
So I guess what Joe would like to do is put the question out there to the board, give us direction on this issue. Is this the board's wish or not for us to be involved in the process, the design process for these projects?
Yeah, I mean,
Is that what we're
it would give
looking
you
for?
simple language that we have been afforded the new charter, and we are confused about our role. The role says this. We think you mean this. We hope you mean this. Is that what you mean, or we recommend you mean this? But if it's really, this is what you mean, then that's
Well, we
okay.
can't recommend what they mean, but we can ask for clarification on what the intention was and make a recommendation that this be part of the process.
So I have the language up here of what our duties are supposed to be. So resolution, it's to provide advice to the Public Works Department and Board of Commissioners regarding compliance with the PA Stormwater Management Act and the Township's MS4 requirements. to recommend capital stormwater projects to be included in the annual budget on or before July 1st of each year, and to assist township staff upon request in establishing a stormwater budget, to prepare and implement a credit program for township property owners. The committee will act as the Radnor Township liaison to the surrounding local governments who are in the same watershed as Radnor Township, including but not limited to Tredyffrin and Easttown Townships, to provide advice and comments to the Board of Commissioners through regularly scheduled reports.
Okay, so the last question that needs the last point that needs clarification, but it's also, the credit program has already been developed and implemented. So I think that should really be to facilitate it, because we've been facilitating it. We've been reviewing the applications, right? So nothing needs to be developed or implemented. That's already been done. It's facilitating the continuance of it.
I'm pretty sure that we are not going to get this ordinance to come back before the Board of Commissioners. I think
No,
the only
that's
thing
why
we
I'm
can
saying we
do
could
is
get clarity
clarify
on those
the
2
last,
points.
the fourth statement.
But also the other point with the credit, they're not looking for us to develop or implement anything. That's
Okay.
already been done. I just want
Yeah,
to
I
be
don't
clear
think
on that.
that's,
We're just going to maintain it.
But the last, to provide advice and comments to Board of Commissioners through regularly scheduled reports is pretty broad, and
Yeah, so-
that's
so I
gonna
think what we
include all
would-
sorts of discussion.
Right, and we could inquire that, can we clarify the process as we move through designs of capital improvement projects? Is that what we're looking for?
I guess I'm struggling with, why would we ask for a narrowing of a focus? Why don't we just take the broad statement as it is and then give advice or help people through, help firms through the design process? I mean,
I
they've
guess
given that. Why would we ask for a narrowing of that?
The issue is that we are not, let's see, not official is not the right word. We're not officially in that process. I guess what we're looking for is maybe a process that will be followed once a contract is issued with a consultant to design something, that they have some, within that RFP, that they need to meet with us, or that, I don't know. I don't know how to solve this, but it just
Can I
seems
make
like
a-
we shouldn't, have to be like,
Can I make
oh,
a
by the way,
comment
can
here?
you come see us?
Yeah, go right to the crux. If we don't have any responsibility, direct responsibility, if we haven't given responsibility to deal with a designer, they're not going to show up. Who's going to pay the bill?
Right.
We have to have the authority to get them here. In TM's situation, we got them here. We had the backing of Steve's and the Radnor Township to get them here and listen to what they had to say. We realized that there was a problem coming up, that the commissioners were going to hear far more in the way of choices than any commissioner group should hear. No one else would, as you said earlier, no one else would have realized that. We realized it. We got them down to a point where there are 2 choices, so the commissioners could make a decision to go further. But if you don't have the responsibility to do that, they haven't given you the authority to do that, you're not going to be able to get another firm who may want to charge a lot to come out. I don't know.
Well, but why wouldn't, I mean, what I heard you say was that we got the cooperation of Steve and the township to say, you should be involved. Why wouldn't we do that again? Why do we have to have a mandate from above?
What we're looking for is a formalized process for that to automatically occur.
You got
and be a
shut
part
down.
of the
We got
process.
shut down. We got shut down. We got a charter put out that said, this is what you're to do. We don't have the same charter we were working with for the last 2 years. So, basically somebody said, oh, they shouldn't be doing that.
But they left that fourth statement.
Well, the other thing I'd like to point out is that had they come to us sooner, or even submitted things to us sooner, we could have saved a lot of time and energy. They were going down the wrong road. They were all over the map, and we could have easily said, "Listen, you're not getting what we're looking for here," because I think at this point we all know that it wasn't going to happen all over that Wawa property. And we could have shut that down from day one. And so had we been involved earlier in the process, maybe there wouldn't have needed to be an additional fund request. Formalizing that process and making it like a mandatory thing rather than after the fact thought. That, I mean, really, honestly, the Board of Commissioners does not need to waste their time until we get to the point where there's some alternatives on the table and we need direction as to how they want to spend the money. And then once those alternatives are worked out and selected, then again, it'll come back when the final design is done to authorize the construction cost. That's the 2 points they need to be in front of the board, but they should be with us on multiple occasions in order to save money, move forward quickly, and resolve issues. But I don't know how to get from where we are today to what needs to be incorporated.
I'm fine with asking for the clarification. I just think the language is there already, but if we want to ask it, it's fine. I want to get out of here.
Just be careful for what you ask for.
I hear you.
What do you recommend we do in order to get that as part of the process? Is that a separate conversation?
I think we start a conversation with Steve and see what he is going to use us for, what he's going to allow us to use. And then maybe we have to come back. But if I were on the board, the way I read this, if I were on the board, they're limiting what we can do. They purposely are limiting what we can do. We heard that when we attended one of the meetings. So let's work with Steve and see what we can actually, how impactful we can be. Because it sounds to me like that's the only way we can work this through. Being very honest about it, if Steve had the engineers on his staff, they would have done what we did.
Yeah, exactly.
But they don't.
Yeah.
So if he plans to use us that way, fine. But otherwise, we're already being reduced through
Yeah,
attrition. So-
I agree, and I don't want to feel like we're an afterthought. There's no point then. It's already been decided, or the money's already spent, and now we're looking for a supplement on a project because we weren't weighing in on it. That seems like I don't want to be in that position.
Can I make one comment, please? Regarding the clarification, Joe was reading from what the commissioner said. Now, the clarification I'm looking for is, they mentioned capital budget. They did not say stormwater advisory capital budget. So is it proper to assume that if a big project gets to go ahead, that will become part of the township capital budget? And I think that's an important thing to consider, because I'm sorry, you guys don't have the money to work with to do it. If it's $2 or $3 million project, you're talking years to ever get anything done. But if it's something that's very practical and important and can be done, let it be done under the township's capital budget. You can provide some of the engineering money if they want, but I think that's one of the things you really have to hammer at the commissioners on. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll set our next meeting time. It will be June 8th.
So Paige, are we sending a note to the commissioners recommending an MS2 or MS4 consultant?
Yeah, I was going to
Okay.
just put together a memo that literally probably 2 sentences, recommending.
Hey,
Yes,
Paige,
yes.
I thought we agreed. I had developed one that's I just need to clean some minor language up, that we were going to do one memo that was going to do anything we recommended, which I captured as 2 items, which is the one is the MS4, and the second one is we voted 4-0 on one and 5 on the other, that the 4 projects would go forward for the 18 budget
Okay,
process.
I think we need a memo, I mean, while we can send it to Steve, it needs to be addressed to the Board of Commissioners, though, for the MS4 recommendation.
I did both of these. I took.
I think they were both going to the board, right?
Right, I
mean,
took
yeah,
these
MS4
In one memo.
definitely-
in one memo.
That's
That's
fine.
fine.
And, I mean, but you had originally proposed that it be written to Steve and to,
I think we,
and Bob. But no, I would
we've
like to
moved in a
argue
different
it should be
direction.
written
Yeah,
to the
it's to the
board,
board.
copying
The-
Steve
The
and.
MS4 absolutely needs to be written to the board because, and.
and the
that
recommendation,
portion
because
of it-
that's what's requested.
The way
on
it is,
projects.
if you remember our memorandums last year that had that format, it had a 2-line, which was the Board of Commissioners, and CC line, which, what I have in my draft has Radnor administration.
That's fine, just a note that MS4 needs to get forwarded to
Well,
Steve
I
tomorrow.
was going to circulate everything to you, and then you would send it.
Yeah,
You know, I'm just giving you like a draft, and then, but I'll send it to everybody but it doesn't change anything that we haven't talked about here tonight. It's just a matter of clarifying what we talked about.
That's fine, I was just noting that while the second part of it, the 4 projects, doesn't necessarily have to be out there tomorrow, that the MS4 does need to be out there tomorrow, so that,
I'll get you
and
something
if we need
first
to
then.
break it into 2 things, that's fine.
I'll get
But-
you something, yeah, right, so we all need to respond quickly, is your point.
Well, I think you already
Yeah.
pretty much said it all. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm good with what you said, and unless there's typos, I'm
So
not
send
weighing
it-
in any
I'll send it out
further.
AM tomorrow, or even late tonight, depending on it.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay.
Okay, and so next meeting, June 8th,
Which I will not be able to make.
which you will,
I won't make, don't
Okay.
change it, I'm just not going to be here.
okay, I just, anyone else have any conflicts with that date?
But our Disney person will be back.
Yes, she will be. No,
Graduation's on the 7th. It's going to be a tough week, but I can pull it
Uh,
out. Got to go down to Temple this
Okay.
year.
no. Okay, meeting adjourned.
Thank you.